In the land of England during the Anglo-Saxon period, situated within the region of the Kingdom of Northumbria and just a short distance from the coast, there is a small island that later generations would often reverently call the Holy Island. That is the island of Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne is the place where people erected a majestic monastery, and it is also the place where the English saint named Cuthbert was later interred. The Lindisfarne Monastery was truly one of the greatest centers of learning in Anglo-Saxon England, and perhaps even across the entire European world of that era. The erudition and the process of academic training here reached its absolute peak around the year 700, marked by the birth of a masterpiece known as the Lindisfarne Gospels. This collection of gospel books is truly a magnificent symbol, not only because of its exquisite artistic design, the meticulous care, and the absolute precision in combining the art of painting with the sacred scriptural texts, but it is also the most brilliant achievement of the intellectual elite belonging to the Anglo-Saxon Christian world. The Lindisfarne Gospels carry within them many incredibly fascinating characteristics. It is one of the most perfect, most outstanding examples of what we call insular script, or otherwise known as the Hiberno-Saxon style of writing. For scholars who specialize in the study of ancient handwriting and classical manuscripts, this is an incredibly unique style of calligraphy, bearing the deep, characteristic hallmarks of this specific region. That is also the exact style of art and writing that we can admire in the famous Book of Kells. The Lindisfarne Gospels, of course, possess all of those incredibly complex and sophisticated interwoven and knotted patterns, along with the breathtakingly beautiful front pages dedicated to each individual gospel book, symbolizing the author of each book, which are the four evangelists. However, just a few short years after this exquisite manuscript was completed, a brutal and devastating tragedy unexpectedly struck the Lindisfarne Monastery. One particular day, as the monks were still diligently working away in the scriptorium, their eyes happened to glance out toward the distant open sea, and suddenly they saw the silhouettes of countless strange ships bobbing and appearing on the horizon. Inherently not the kind of people to be easily frightened by the appearance of sea vessels, because they were already so accustomed to the sight of merchant ships and other maritime vessels bustling back and forth on the surface of the sea day and night, the monks completely let down their guard and had absolutely no preparation whatsoever for the impending disaster that was about to fall upon their heads. When those strange ships dropped their anchors and landed on the shore, stepping down onto the sand were not merchants carrying fine silks or exotic spices, but a bloodthirsty raiding party. They absolutely did not come here to engage in trade or commerce, nor did they come to seek salvation or anything related to faith from the monastery. The men who had just stepped onto the shore were fierce Viking warriors. They had crossed the turbulent waters from their distant homeland of Scandinavia, and their sole purpose upon setting foot here was to raid, to devastate, and to strip away all of the most precious possessions of this sacred monastery. A brutal massacre unfolded. Many gentle monks were savagely murdered without mercy, while others were severely injured, cruelly beaten, and tortured, and those fortunate enough to survive were forced to flee for their lives to save themselves. This bloody and horrific attack on the Lindisfarne Monastery, even though there had been a few sporadic Viking raids prior to this, for historians, this specific event officially marks the starting point for an incredibly terrifying and massive era of expansion by the Vikings. The story of the Vikings, fundamentally, is a rather familiar topic to all of us, at least through the lenses and the understanding of popular culture. Many of us, whenever the word Viking is mentioned, can immediately conjure up in our minds the image of a barbaric, wild warrior, sometimes wearing a helmet adorned with sharp horns on his head. Even though the image of that horned helmet is actually nothing more than a myth, a fabrication woven by later generations, and is absolutely not the historical truth about the Vikings, the image of them stepping down from their dragon ships, gripping their weapons tightly, and conducting raids across the lands of Europe has been deeply etched into everyone's minds. We are also perhaps very familiar with an astonishing historical fact that the Vikings were the very first people to set sail across the vast ocean, to set foot on the icy island of Iceland, and then continued their epic journey straight to the distant land of Greenland, and ultimately reaching all the way to the New World. They were truly the first Westerners in the world to travel that far, leaving behind all the boundaries of human knowledge of that era. However, the story of the Vikings is not simply about plundering adventures. It is a story of immense and profound importance to the process of developing, shaping, and completely transforming the Christian world in the West. This is a story that takes us deep into exploring who the Vikings truly were, what their cultural, social, and geographical background was like, and their massive role in molding the entire European world, as well as their profound impact on the Church. To understand all of those things, we must inevitably begin by closely examining the origins of the Scandinavian peoples. The Scandinavian group, of course, are the peoples originating from the three countries that we still call Denmark, Norway, and Sweden today. That entire vast region, clearly, is not a land with a warm or temperate tropical climate. The climate there is incredibly harsh and chilling to the bone. In fact, during the early Middle Ages, the Scandinavian region appeared as a gloomy, desolate, and freezing wilderness. That land was covered by vast, ancient primeval forests that seemed almost endless, and there was truly very little, very rare fertile land that could be used for plowing or agricultural cultivation across the territories of Scandinavia. Precisely because of these harsh natural conditions, the Scandinavian peoples in reality relied very little, if not entirely did not rely, on farming to sustain their lives or to provide food for their daily meals. Instead, to survive, they were forced to cast their eyes out toward the stormy seas. They became highly skilled fishermen, catching fish on the open ocean, or they focused on animal husbandry, meaning they raised large herds of livestock for meat and milk. Their daily diet consisted primarily of red meat, fresh milk, rich cheese, creamy butter, and of course, interspersed with a great deal of fish caught from the sea. Due to the direct influence of this highly protein-rich diet, coupled with a living environment that demanded constant physical exertion, they have been viewed throughout the course of history, and even up to this day, in the popular imaginations of the Vikings, as people possessing massive statures, barrel-shaped chests, extraordinary strength, and hulking bodies. It was precisely that robust physique that helped them, in many different ways, to completely overwhelm and terrify any opponent when facing them directly on the battlefield. The history of this description can be traced all the way back to the era of the mighty Roman Empire. When Roman soldiers first encountered the Scandinavian tribes, they described these people as creatures with massive, towering figures, with hair as fiery red as flames, cold light-colored eyes, and an incredibly overwhelming and frightening outward appearance. Of course, many of these descriptions by the Romans stemmed from the condescension and arrogance of a civilization that proclaimed itself the center of the world. The Romans always considered the Vikings, as well as countless other Germanic peoples living in the freezing northern regions, simply as barbarians, uncivilized people unworthy of respect. However, the Scandinavian world was absolutely not isolated, remote, or completely separated from the general flow of Europe as we often automatically assume. The Scandinavian world did have a certain difference due to having to endure incredibly harsh, endlessly long winters, and also because of the way their social life had evolved and adapted. They were absolutely not people who lived concentrated in bustling urban areas. They did not build vast, magnificent cities to attract more residents to live there like the southern civilizations. In many cases, the Scandinavian peoples were those who lived under a clan system, tightly bound to one another by bloodlines. They often joined hands to build incredibly large mead drinking halls, usually erected around a sacred tree or an ancient oak tree holding divine significance to their beliefs. Their entire lives would revolve around and take place inside these small clans. And these clans did not necessarily hold loyalty or have connections with other neighboring clans, and they possessed absolutely no clear concept of national unity or a unified national identity. But despite all of those unique and distinct characteristics, the Scandinavian world was truly not isolated. It did not sit on the outer fringes of the world, and it was not entirely too different from their neighboring counterparts such as the Celtic or Anglo-Saxon peoples. Of course, in the British Isles at that historical moment, the people holding the supreme ruling power were the Anglo-Saxons. And these Anglo-Saxons, as history has recorded, were divided into four powerful kingdoms. Those were the Kingdom of Northumbria, the Kingdom of Mercia, the Kingdom of Wessex, and finally the Kingdom of Sussex. Across the Channel on the vast European continent, we have the presence of the mighty Frankish empires, who had risen and seized dominance over incredibly vast territories in the European world. However, that giant Frankish empire was actually built and laid upon the foundation of a way of life, a Celtic or Gothic culture that had existed and taken root long before. And the Celtic world during this period encompassed the land of Gaul, which includes modern-day France, some territories of modern-day Germany, and the Netherlands. In all three of these vast regions, including Scandinavia, Anglo-Saxon England, and the expansive lands of the Celtic world throughout the ancient Roman period, they all shared a deeply profound common Germanic foundation and origin. Among these seemingly different cultures existed countless bustling networks of trade and commerce. There was absolutely no open, bitter hostility originating from centuries past, nor was there any deep-seated hatred in their historical past hindering their interactions. Precisely because of that relatively peaceful backdrop, when we step into the era of brutal expansion, raiding, and warfare of the Vikings, in many ways, it seemed to strike unexpectedly, much like a sudden bolt of lightning across a clear blue sky. When the Scandinavians began to set sail and become true Viking raiders, they absolutely did not come with the purpose of settling old debts, nor was it to seek revenge for some ancient grudge from times long past. Instead, what actually happened was that, almost simultaneously, and in a highly collective manner, they simply launched themselves into a fierce expansionist policy, a large-scale conquest that would take their dragon ships to every nook and cranny of the world known to humans at that time. But once again, to emphasize clearly the background story, the context behind the Scandinavians, the Anglo-Saxons, and the entire Celtic or Gothic world truly had a deeply intertwined and incredibly tight connection with one another. However, a terrible thing happened when the Great Western Roman Empire officially collapsed in the 5th century. That collapse brought about a decentralizing effect on power, leading to a massive division and regionalization that spread across a vast majority of European territory. We can see the efforts to heal this division through the reigns of the Emperor Charlemagne and the rise of the Carolingian Empire, along with the way this empire attempted to conquer and gather many of the fragmented lands on the continent. Yet, a much larger, deeper, and more structural concern had truly occurred along with the fall of Rome. That was the harsh reality that, in many aspects, there was absolutely no centralized imperial army left, no powerful military force capable of restraining or stopping certain cultures, or holding back other peoples if they suddenly decided to use their military advantage or martial prowess to attack and plunder those around them. Finally, another crucial development occurred as the Anglo-Saxons began the process of conversion, abandoning their old beliefs to embrace the Christian faith, and as the Frankish empires began to officially adopt and consider Christianity their state religion, what we can see happening in these two regions is a highly complex picture. It was a blending, an intricate intertwining between the ancient pagan ways of life that had taken deep root in their subconscious and the entirely new Christian practices that they were striving to apply in an attempt to sanctify and purify their entire culture. We can take one of the most classic and greatest examples to illustrate this blending, which is the epic poem Beowulf. And of course, our entire understanding of the epic Beowulf today has been massively expanded and enriched thanks to the historic archaeological excavations at the Sutton Hoo site. If you have ever held in your hands or seen any modern publication printing the story of Beowulf, it is highly likely that one of two very familiar images will appear on its cover. It could be the image of the sharp sword of the hero Beowulf, or it will be the image of the majestic warrior helmet found at Sutton Hoo. Both of these iconic artifacts originate from the exact same time period when the epic Beowulf was penned. And, of course, the plot of Beowulf is a relatively familiar story to many people. It is an epic tale about a brave hero named Beowulf. He courageously crossed the sea, traveling all the way to the Kingdom of Denmark with the sole purpose of helping the king of this land defeat a hideous monster. That monster was sowing absolute terror for the entire clan. It constantly lurked and sneaked into the mead hall on dark nights, kidnapping and devouring the bravest warriors. And that bloodthirsty monster, of course, bears the name Grendel. However, there is a highly crucial detail that people often forget when mentioning the epic Beowulf. That is the fact that this great literary work was actually not written by someone following a pagan faith. The epic Beowulf was composed and compiled around the year 700. It was actually compiled, written, and completed around the timeline of the year 700, which is almost at the exact same time as the creation of the exquisite Lindisfarne Gospels that we mentioned at the beginning. But the astonishing thing is, Beowulf was penned by an author who was a Saxon Christian. This anonymous author, when recounting the heroic legendary tale of his people, actually used two completely different and conflicting tones and attitudes interwoven throughout the entire work. On one hand, he appears to be somewhat ashamed, embarrassed, and wishes to eradicate the superstitious pagan elements of his ancestors. But on the other hand, deep down inside him, there still boils a fierce sense of national cultural identity, a profound pride for the heroic tales of the great heroes originating from his very own traditions and roots. This internal conflict can be compared to how many people in the modern world view the history of their own country, where people can feel incredibly proud of their national heritage and the great achievements of their ancestors, even if they themselves currently no longer agree with or share the religious beliefs and core values that those ancestors once expressed and believed in. And therefore, the entire Celtic and Anglo-Saxon world during this period was undergoing an immensely massive and painful process of change, a cultural and spiritual molting as it was gradually Christianized. However, the most important thing regarding the story of the Vikings is the fact that the Scandinavians had absolutely not been drawn into or become a part of that Christianization process yet. In reality, the Vikings still remained completely loyal, still placing their entire faith in the ancient Norse gods of paganism. Therefore, we need to have a brief and clear description to understand who these Norse gods actually were and what the true nature of the Viking religion was. When you begin to study the Norse gods and the way the Vikings conducted their worship and offered sacrifices to their deities, the very first thing you will notice is that there are fascinating similarities and parallels with how the ancient Romans interacted with their own holy gods. Of course, in Roman history, there are always recorded stories about individuals who believed fervently and blindly in their faith. But at the same time, there are also countless other stories about pagans who simply performed religious rituals in a soulless manner, like an obligation that had to be fulfilled. They did so only for the purpose of maintaining customs, or simply as a precaution to ensure their own safety, doing everything possible to make sure the gods would not get angry and rain disaster upon their heads, just in case those gods actually existed and were paying attention from above. And regarding the Vikings, you will also encounter a very similar mindset quite often. There really was absolutely no element in the Viking belief system systematic or dogmatic enough to make us truly call it a religion in the literal sense. There was absolutely no existence of any specialized priestly class or clergy in Norse mythology. There was completely no class system where individuals were specifically designated with the sacred duty of igniting, spreading, or maintaining the flame of religious faith within the communities of the Scandinavian peoples. In reality, conducting worship and offering sacrifices to the gods was considered a personal responsibility, an obvious duty of all Scandinavian people independently. This becomes especially clear when you connect the stories of the Norse gods with an ideology that worshipped military strength, a martial ideal steeped in their culture. The rich and detailed knowledge we have today about the Vikings, or about the Norse mythological system, has been primarily passed down to us through two incredibly important main texts. Although some other documents still exist, the two main texts that continue to be read, analyzed, and passionately studied to this very day are the Poetic Edda, penned and compiled around the 800s or 900s, and the prose work Prose Edda, a magnificent piece synthesized and compiled in the 13th century. Through the stories recorded in these works, we find a mythological system among the northern Scandinavian gods that bears many profound differences from what you might find in other areas of the pagan world. There are two most prominent and unique characteristics of the Norse religion that you will find very hard to locate in the majority of Greek or Roman mythological stories or anywhere else in the world. The first factor, and also the most important one, is that within the Scandinavian mythological system, they possess a creation myth, a story explaining the origins of the universe in a relatively clear and coherent manner. They have a detailed storyline about how everything in this universe was formed and born. Along with that, they also possess a cosmological system that is much more cohesive, logical, and coherent than what you could gather from Greek and Roman mythology. Of course, both the Romans and the Greeks, especially the Romans, frequently mentioned the dwellings of the gods. They constantly told stories about the misty Mount Olympus, and they discussed how the gods governed and controlled various aspects of the natural world. However, that was not truly a complete cosmological system. It leaned more toward a feeling, a belief that the gods were like lords who managed specific matters that the Romans particularly cared about in their daily lives, such as crop harvests, marriages, fertility, and things like that. Meanwhile, in Norse mythology, you have a relatively cohesive and unified cosmological system, meaning they actually designated specific positions and locations for almost every creature, entity, or species they ever interacted with or imagined in their minds. The second factor that makes Norse mythology incredibly unique is that they have a conceptual system regarding the end of the world, or eschatology. The Norse people have an incredibly clear concept, a detailed vision of how this entire world will come to an end and face destruction. So first and foremost, let us step into the creation story together. The tale passed down within the Scandinavian community tells that, in a distant, silent time in the past, nothing existed yet, except for a single giant god named Ymir. Ymir lived alone in a deep icy cave. It seemed he was locked tightly, imprisoned forever in this freezing cave, and the mythological stories do not explain the reason why he was there, or how the very first creatures appeared at the dawn of time. But everything begins with the image of Ymir living solitarily in that ice cave, and his life was sustained by the milk of a primordial cow. Of course, this is the Scandinavian worldview. When the weather outside becomes too freezing, you have to hide indoors and survive on the food source provided by your domesticated animals. Over time, that primordial cow began to continuously lick the freezing blocks of ice with its tongue. I suppose its purpose was simply to seek drinking water. Good. But during the process of endlessly licking that block of ice, it accidentally revealed the form of another god named Buri. And thus, Buri was freed from his cold imprisonment inside the thick layer of ice. Later on, Buri became the father who gave birth to the god Odin and two of Odin's other brothers. And then, a tragedy occurred. Odin and his brothers joined forces to murder the giant god Ymir. But the miraculous thing is, they used the exact giant corpse of Ymir to shape and create this entire world. And that created world is truly fascinating, at least when we view it from the perspective of a symbolic literary work. This world is envisioned and structured as a massive, giant tree named Yggdrasil. And this divine tree Yggdrasil acts as a sturdy skeletal structure, a central coordinate axis tasked with supporting and keeping all the worlds tightly connected together. In the complex cosmological system of the Scandinavians, there are a total of 9 worlds, 9 completely independent and separate realms, but all of them are attached, suspended around this sacred tree. They are arranged on different levels and positions along the trunk and beneath the roots. This is the dwelling place of all the gods, humans, and a multitude of other magical creatures. The very first place you will step into when you begin to move downward along the tree, lingering in the area near the roots, is Asgard. Asgard, of course, is the majestic realm of the supreme god Odin and his entire divine clan, including the mighty thunder god Thor, the beautiful goddess Sif, and all the gods who play the most crucial, pivotal roles in the belief system of the Scandinavian peoples. Actually, in the past, there used to be another place called Vanaheim, which was the dwelling of the ancient giant gods belonging to the Vanir family, but this land is not mentioned or discussed very much in the legendary tales. Asgard is truly the center of power, the most bustling area for all activities of the divine beings. Located on the same level as Asgard, there is a radiant area named Alfheim. This is the luminous domain where the light elves live. They are the gentle and kind-hearted elves. Of course, if you are an enthusiast of the works of the author Tolkien, these details will certainly start to sound incredibly familiar and evocative of many things. Because clearly, Tolkien was an erudite scholar, a leading expert in studying all of these mythological systems, and especially an expert on the epic Beowulf. Therefore, having a large number of similarities and magical intersections between Norse mythology and the masterpiece The Lord of the Rings should come as no surprise. But returning to the story, Alfheim is where the kind light elves live, and surrounding this area is also an incredibly special place, which is the realm of Valhalla. Valhalla is a place carrying a meaning similar to heaven, but the special thing is, it is absolutely not an open heaven welcoming everyone. Valhalla is the sacred realm belonging exclusively to the god Odin, a place reserved only for the warriors who bravely threw themselves into glorious battles and fell heroically on the battlefield. Among those souls of fallen warriors, only half will be honored to be taken to Valhalla, and the other half will be personally chosen by Freya, Odin's wife, to be brought back to her own realm. If you are lucky enough to be taken to Valhalla, Of course, everything there is incredibly wonderful for you. I often describe Valhalla as being like one final, unrestrained party night for true men. Basically, it is an immense, endless mead-drinking hall, where the souls of these outstanding warriors will come to enjoy eternal life. And during their stay there, they will be feasted daily by a strange, magical boar. Every night, this boar will offer up its own meat as food for the warriors, and the next morning it will resurrect completely intact. Additionally, there is a magical goat always ready to provide them with the most delicious, exquisite meats they have ever tasted in their lives. I suppose it is exactly like a festive barbecue party in heaven. Thus, half of the warriors will be taken to Valhalla, where they will eat their fill and train daily to await the greatest final battle named Ragnarok, an event we will discuss in detail shortly. The remaining half will be carefully selected by the goddess Freya to go live in her realm. And the beings holding the sacred responsibility of flying and scouring the bloody battlefields to seek out and collect the warriors chosen by Freya to bring back to her realm are the Valkyries. If you are a passionate fan of the art form of opera, you will certainly recognize or know of the incredibly famous Ring Cycle play by the great composer Richard Wagner. And of course, the classic piece of music that many of us have heard, even if we do not truly have a deep understanding of opera, is the Ride of the Valkyries. Yes, the music playing during the Ride of the Valkyries segment in Wagner's work is exactly meant to depict this scene. It is the moment occurring right after a fiercely brutal battle, and the Valkyries are swooping down onto the battlefield. That epic music is the rhythm of their flight, as they hurriedly descend to Earth to choose which brave warriors will be honored to follow and serve the goddess Freya. Therefore, this first level of the world, including Asgard, Alfheim, Valhalla, and a few other places, truly acts as the highest order, a supreme tier among the 9 worlds. However, if you step down to a level lower than Asgard and Valhalla, you will enter the realm of humanity. This area is known by the name Midgard, or Middle Earth. And Midgard is separated by treacherous, overlapping mountain ranges from another world named Jotunheim. This is the dwelling place of the giants, the sworn enemies that the god Odin constantly has to find ways to intervene to restrain and push back. At this level, there are also other worlds. There is Svartalfheim, a dark land where the dark elves reside. The Scandinavians had a deep belief that these dark elves were evil creatures bringing horrifying nightmares. They would sneak into your room at night, sit squarely on your chest, making you feel a heavy shortness of breath, and then endlessly whisper demonic, dark thoughts into your ears while you were deep in slumber. And located right next to this Midgard or Middle Earth area is also the home of the skilled dwarf race. Continuing to descend to an even lower level, you will set foot in the land of the realm of Hell. And yes, the name Hell is the etymological root, the origin of the word we often use today to describe eternal punishment and torment in the Bible, when we speak of sinners being cast down to hell. There is only one single difference, which is that in the religion of the Scandinavians, hell to them is not about blazing hot flames, but rather a realm of eternal ice. The most terrifying torture in the realm of hell is the fact that you will be frozen, gnawed at by the bone-chilling cold to the very end of eternity. And there is one final, equally important detail, which is the existence of a dragon or a giant serpent. Sometimes it is simply called a snake, but in the literary language of the Scandinavians, the term snake or serpent is often used to refer to a giant dragon, or a giant earthworm, as they called it. However, regardless of what it is called, it is a giant dragon or snake, possessing an unimaginably massive size. Its body coils and completely wraps around the entire world. In fact, in a legendary tale, the thunder god Thor once fought and defeated this terrifying dragon, causing its massive corpse to sink deep down to the bottom of the dark ocean. Yet, that monster is not completely dead. It is submerged in a deep sleep and will surely rise again at the time of the apocalypse to seek bloody revenge in the great apocalyptic battle named Ragnarok. Now, let us speak in more detail about the apocalypse, Ragnarok. In the realm of Asgard, basically, you have a ruling system in the form of a monarchy of the gods. At the head is the god Odin, who is ruling all of Asgard as the supreme father of many other gods. Odin is frequently depicted in the image of a god with pitch-black ravens always soaring, closely following by his sides. Odin is a wanderer, a great traveler. He always craves and pursues learning, seeking knowledge everywhere, in every moment. In fact, he is often portrayed with the image of having only a single eye. The reason is because when given the opportunity to drink water from the Well of Wisdom, a magical well located beneath the sacred tree Yggdrasil, he did not hesitate, willingly gouging out one of his own eyes in exchange for a sip of water from that sacred well, in order to gain a profound insight, a deep understanding of the universe. And the god Odin is also the one who bestowed priceless knowledge upon humanity. This is most clearly demonstrated through the event where he taught humans how to use the ancient rune characters. Rune characters in Scandinavian culture are not just ordinary writing, they are magical alphabets containing supernatural power. You can carve these characters onto your sharp sword, or carve them onto large stones placed in an open field, and those characters will enchant, infusing powerful magical properties into your sword or other objects. Of course, the god Odin has many children, but his brightest heir is the thunder god Thor, the steadfast patron deity of all humanity. One thing is certain, the figure of the god Thor in ancient Scandinavian literary text is absolutely not like a pampered young master, possessing shiny blonde hair blowing in the wind and a body with sexy six-pack abs like in the movies. The real god Thor, as I often like to compare, bears a striking resemblance to the character Fred Flintstone. He is incredibly large and fat, possessing a barrel-shaped, expansive chest. He drinks alcohol like water, living a rough, loud, and wild life. He is truly a powerful alpha male archetype, a characteristic alpha male prototype for Scandinavian men. The god Thor, of course, is the lord who governs thunder, blinding lightning bolts, and furious storms. And both of these natural phenomena play a vital role for you if you are someone who has to spend the majority of your life floating on the vast open sea. And his ultimate weapon, the magic hammer Mjolnir, is considered one of the most powerful weapons in mythology. In the Scandinavian world, people often had the habit of casting the shape of Thor's hammer in dependence and wearing it around their necks as an amulet to pray for protection. Additionally, there are countless other gods in the Norse pantheon. There is the beautiful goddess Sif, there is the god Balder, one of Odin's outstanding sons, who married the goddess Nanna. And of course, for any of you who grew up with the habit of calling your beloved grandmother Nana, that word originates right here. Nanna is the goddess who represents all that is most gentle, warm, and sacred about motherly love. And this entire complex cosmological system, all of these thrilling mythological tales about the gods, ultimately all lead to a single ending point, an eschatology, a vision of the end of the world. And in many cases, for the Vikings, their entire mental strength, the entire intense religious energy of the faith they carried in their hearts, were driven, ignited by a single truth, which was that they had been promised, guaranteed an honorary place to participate in the Battle of Ragnarok, as long as they fought bravely, tenaciously, and fearlessly on the bloody battlefield like true Viking warriors. Once again, it must be reiterated that those honored to step into the realm of the goddess Freya and those summoned to the realm of Valhalla were almost always assumed to be the bravest warriors. You do not simply go to Valhalla or Freya's realm to rest or enjoy eternal peace. Instead, you go to those places with a single purpose, to prepare and wait for the final great battle named Ragnarok. For them, being present and fighting in Ragnarok was considered the ultimate glory, the greatest thrill and excitement that a living being could desire. So, what exactly is Ragnarok? Fundamentally, when translated, Ragnarok has a meaning equivalent to a phrase like the twilight of the gods, or even more fiercely, the death of the gods, the end of all divine beings. Quite a few commentators and scholars have had to speak up to point out the incredibly unique, incredibly different ways that the Vikings imagined and believed about the deaths of their gods. They point out that, even as the Vikings knelt, reverently worshiping their gods as unbreakable pillars of strength, and viewing them as supreme beings capable of molding and shaping their lives on this earth, in this current lifetime, deep within their hearts, they still always firmly believed that, when the final moment of time struck, many of the mighty gods they worshiped daily would be overthrown, would be slaughtered by dark forces. But the miraculous thing is, they also believed that in that final moment, even if some of their great gods had to fall in battle, the ultimate result, the final transformation brought about, would still be something of a new harmony and balance. The story of the Battle of Ragnarok is an incredibly complex sequence of events. There have been many different perspectives and viewpoints on this event, even within the Viking communities themselves. But the simplest, most popular story told is about the betrayal of the god Loki. Loki is the adopted brother of the god Thor and is one of the sons of the god Odin. Of course, in mythology, there is always a bit of controversy, a bit of ambiguity surrounding whether Loki was truly adopted, or if he himself also carried the bloodline of one of Odin's biological children. But no matter what his true identity was, Loki's nature remained that of a god of temptation, an incredibly scheming and cunning trickster. He was always able to find all sorts of ways, using all kinds of tricks to distort and sabotage the good goals and noble plans of the god Odin, the god Thor, and the other gods. And finally, Loki's treachery reached its climax when he decided to turn his back, ruthlessly betraying the realm of Asgard, and that very action officially unchained and unleashed the disaster of Ragnarok. The first event, the first omen said to have occurred right before the nightmare of Ragnarok officially began, was the tragic death of the god Balder, the favored son of the god Odin, and also the brother of the god Thor. And right after Balder breathed his last breath, the Battle of Ragnarok was officially ignited. A multitude of terrifying, rapid-fire events occurred afterward. We could dive deep into analyzing every little detail, but that is perhaps unnecessary here. Just to highlight a few of the most important points, the supreme god Odin had to enter a life-or-death battle, a fierce fight to the finish with his sworn enemies. The giant serpent, the terrifying dragon that the god Thor had defeated before, the one that once coiled itself entirely around the world but was then submerged deep down to the bottom of the dark ocean, had now risen and returned to the surface. It began spewing deadly streams of venom splashing everywhere across the bloody battlefield. And then, the god Thor had to throw himself into a fight for survival, locking tightly onto this giant dragon. Both fought with unparalleled strength, and although that giant snake eventually succeeded in killing and defeating the mighty god of thunder, before dying, the god Thor managed to land fatal blows, inflicting such severe wounds upon the dragon that it too had to collapse and die shortly after. Finally, when the battle concluded, the majority of the mighty gods of Asgard had been tragically slain. The rare, few gods who survived this apocalyptic great battle gathered together, and they decided to continue their journey to build a new paradise, a new peaceful dwelling place of their own. And one of the greatest structures they set out to construct was an entirely new mead drinking hall, and that magnificent new drinking hall was named Gimla. Once again, we see an interesting connection with the work, The Lord of the Rings. Gimlo is the sacred refuge that the surviving gods seek out to live and exist. And when everything ends, Ragnarok is not merely a brutal destruction, a final period for the divine beings, but it is also the complete and utter destruction of this entire world. However, the world does not die forever, but it will resurrect, it will be recreated. Exactly as the legendary story tells, at the final moment after the storm of Ragnarok passes, two humans luckily survived and returned. It was one man and one woman. This couple emerged from the deep sea, and they carried on their shoulders an immensely massive responsibility, which was to reproduce, repopulate the entire population on this earth, and start everything all over again. This story of rebirth has led to some confusion, or rather generated incredibly fierce debates even among academic scholars. And truly, there is absolutely no consistent or absolutely clear answer within the entire Viking mythological system regarding this issue. The big question raised is, does this ending represent a cyclical loop of time? Like the disaster of Ragnarok will keep repeating over and over again, and after every destruction, humanity is reborn from the ashes. And the accompanying question is, will the gods themselves be reborn as well, or will they return in some different form? And the truth is, there is absolutely no answer to that mystery, but needless to say, at the ultimate end of time, humanity in many ways was left behind, forced to fend for themselves, finding their own way to survive against nature when all the mighty gods had been defeated. In that final moment, humanity is truly reborn. Some researchers have viewed this event as a symbol for the rise, the liberation of humanity escaping from the overshadowing power of the gods. They argue that the gods had exhausted their last drops of vitality, poured out all of their supreme power just to protect the existence of humanity, and to put a permanent end to the dark evil forces. And that, the rebirth of humanity at this point in time, is precisely the moment when mankind can truly flourish brilliantly, freely rising up without being suppressed by tyrannical dictatorial forces, no longer governed by devastating natural disasters, and no longer hindered by elements that always interfered and forbade them from reaching their true destiny. In whatever case it may be, whether it is a cyclical view of cosmic time or whether it is a liberation, a rise to escape the authoritarian rule of the gods, or even some entirely different explanation that we still cannot fully grasp, the final result, the overarching meaning of it remains. It is this very vision of the Battle of Ragnarok that was the real spark, the thing that ignited the flames of imagination and bravery in the hearts of the Viking warriors. When they set out to participate in military campaigns, when they threw themselves into bloody and fiery raids, they absolutely did not simply depart with the petty goal of hoarding wealth or seeking comfortable, trivial material benefits. Although, of course, plundering wealth was one of the actions they performed a lot, but deep down inside, they were always intensely inspired, and they were always ready to sacrifice their own lives for a noble ideal. That the truly important thing they must do was to place themselves in the most dangerous positions on the battlefield, to challenge themselves to be worthy of being chosen and taken to the hall of the goddess Freya after falling in glory, or to be welcomed into the realm of Valhalla, where they would proudly wait to participate in the final great battle named Ragnarok. Therefore, the Vikings were absolutely not just worldly people who only knew how to pursue luxury or material comforts. They absolutely did not just selfishly set sail for base personal gains. Instead, hidden deep within them was an incredibly powerful pagan religious ideology, an invisible motivation constantly urging, compelling them to crave a heroic death on the battlefield, or to be honored with participation in the most glorious battle, so that from there, they could be judged as souls worthy of stepping into the realm of Valhalla or being welcomed at Freya's divine court. And precisely because of that sacred reason, what they gradually evolved and became was an incredibly formidable military force, a raiding syndicate, a guerrilla combat force possessing a religious fervor burning in their veins. It was that religious flame that urged, motivated them to constantly reach further, traveling much farther than any civilization that had existed in the past. A huge part of the reason explaining why they were able to achieve such brilliant successes on their path of conquest was thanks to the emergence of their own extraordinary leaps, their own superior technologies in the field of maritime shipbuilding. Through many centuries of accumulating experience, the Vikings invented and developed countless, highly sophisticated shipbuilding techniques, improvements that gave them countless strategic advantages whenever they decided to launch raiding campaigns deep into the European continent. They built ships with very shallow drafts, yet possessing the miraculous ability to carry a very large number of people. These ships could be navigated flexibly by the pulling power of oars. They invented the sturdy keel for the ship, and finally, giant sails were also put to use by them extremely effectively, allowing them to catch the wind and surf the waves, traveling further, reaching unfamiliar waters far beyond any journey they had ever undertaken before. And the result of those extraordinary efforts was that the Vikings, carrying within them the endless inspiration from the heroic ideal of the Battle of Ragnarok, were able to freely conduct expeditions, freely organizing devastating raids back and forth across every place on the European territory. They even advanced deep along the currents of the rivers, striking shallowly all the way down to the vast lands of Russia. And they did not stop there. They continued their epic journey, heading straight down to the glamorous capital of Constantinople. Of course, they were also the ones who hoisted sails to cross the vast ocean, finding the way to set foot all the way to the New World. They were able to accomplish all of those extraordinary things precisely thanks to their era, transcending advancements in the art of shipbuilding. History has recorded a highly famous instance. On the exact day of Holy Easter, the Vikings boldly advanced deep into the center of Europe. They blatantly rowed their ships upstream, heading straight into the center of the city of Paris, and easily conquering the city of Paris right on that Easter day. In countless other cases along the long coastlines, they would suddenly appear and conduct a raid. They would launch a lightning-fast attack on a peaceful village. They would level a city. They would snatch away anything they desired and needed. And then, they would retreat, disappearing as quickly as the way they had appeared, leaving long before the local reinforcing military forces had any opportunity to arrive in time. And therefore, the inevitable consequence of the lightning-fast raids and the relentless expansion of the Vikings was that it created a panic, a terror enveloping the entire leadership, the kings and lords of Europe, the people who were racking their brains trying to find a way to deal with the constant threat from the Viking raids. One of the most ambitious goals that Charlemagne and the successors to his throne had always strived to execute, just like the aspiration of the great Roman emperors before them, was that they wanted to unite all of Europe under a single banner, under a single supreme ruling authority. However, when faced with the cruel reality of the raids and the expansion of the Vikings, they were forced to admit and accept a harsh truth. They absolutely did not have in their hands any powerful standing army, nor did they possess the abundant natural resources that could allow them to maintain and feed a giant army stationed along the borders, just like the way the Roman Empire had once done to repel and block the invading barbarian tribes. And so, the result was, the kings and rulers in the early Middle Ages were forced to rack their brains, finding new methods to ignite the fighting spirit, to inspire the citizens living in the areas heavily affected by the Viking raids, so that they could stand up and take up arms to protect themselves. And the core idea, the most important solution put forward, was the concept of granting feudal titles to vassals. It was the decentralization, the breaking down of the centralized power of the empire and of the kings everywhere across the vast territories under their ownership. They executed this by appointing vassals. These vassals would have to swear an oath of absolute loyalty to the supreme king, but in return, they would be entrusted with the incredibly important responsibility of having to organize forces to protect a specific territory. And as a worthy reward in return for the merit of protecting that land, they would be bestowed by the king with vast lands, granted serfs to plow the fields, and get to enjoy countless privileges, the benefits that came with the status of a defender of the kingdom as a unified entity. And this model of social management, of course, is what we today still often call by the name of the feudal system. But in reality, the formation of the feudal system, in the majority of cases, was a direct defensive reaction to cope with the devastation of the Vikings, or to say it more accurately, it was the result of the impotence, the weakness of the central government in maintaining control and protecting the safety of the borders surrounding its incredibly vast territories. And the birth of the feudal system brought about an immensely massive, incredibly astounding impact on the entire history of Europe. It completely changed the cultural face of the whole society. It changed from the very roots the way humans communicated and interacted with each other. It simultaneously became an endless source of inspiration for the birth of noble ideals such as the gallant spirit of chivalry, the appearance of brave knights, and it also propelled the minor aristocratic classes to view themselves both as loyal soldiers, the protectors of the thrones and the power of the lords. But at the same time, in certain circumstances, they were also ready to become opposing enemies, fierce competitors fighting for power against their very own lords, and could even become plotters usurping the throne. Besides that, it also carried a highly regrettable consequence, which was the fact that it adopted the cruel slave system of the ancient Roman Empire and then froze it, crystallized it to turn it into the model of serfdom. In this new system, the serfs would be tied permanently to the piece of land they plowed. They were completely stripped of the freedom to travel or move, and basically, they were just miserable slaves under a different name. And thus, it can be seen that the Vikings clearly exposed the truth that the world at that time was in desperate need of the emergence of a ruling system, a completely new model of social management. And it is that very new system born from blood and fire that, in an inevitable and unavoidable way, molded and shaped the entire face of Europe that we know today.